Yes, as Loretta said, it was very painful hearing what happened, in Meron. Very painful, very painful. But we trust God. That's what we say. We say we don't always understand things, but we trust. That's always in many situations in life. We go back to that basic sense of like, we don't know, we don't understand, but that doesn't take away our trust. So, anyone else want to talk about how their week was? Sorry, I don't know, bad cough. Anyone else want to share anything from their past week? Anything where they experienced something from God or something they want to share?
I just think I'm always impressed about the deeper understanding that we get with just the, I don't know, the more Torah study, the more that we try to look at life through, the way God would want us to look at it. It's just, it's really interesting to see things unfold and to have like sometimes it's not even a greater understanding. It's just what you said. It's just the acknowledgement that we know that everything happens is that there's a purpose and there's a reason and it's for the best and there's something for us to learn from it. And that even if we don't feel it all the time, to fake it until you make it when it comes to that, because that's going to give you the greatest amount of peace and the ability to move forward sometimes, I think.
Absolutely. And with an awareness that inside of us, like we say, we don't understand it, we don't feel it, but our inner core is God, is our soul. So when we're saying outer words that are reflective of our inner reality, each time we say those outer words, it more and more oxygenates our inner reality. So it more and more gives that space inside of us air and opens it up. So we can feel on the inside like we're telling ourselves on the outside. The more we live God, the more we talk God, the more we condition our thoughts to be in a godly way, it just more and more opens up that piece of God that's inside of me. And then my inside and my outside get more and more in sync. So we, modern psychology sort of views it the reverse, but from the Torah perspective, there's a saying, after the actions comes the hearts, which means that our outer reality, what we say, feeling it or not, what we do, feeling it or not, that molds our inner world. It's not that first I'm going to get my inner world healthy and then my inner world will reflect outward. Mm-hmm. That's a process in that. But our outer reality impacts our inner world. So when the outer reality is reflective of God's energy, this enables that inner world to be in sync with it. Because of course, in my inner core, that is what's real inside of me. It's just not always, sometimes there's a blurring of the interface between the inside and the outside. So when the outside is as the inner core is, it makes it more harmonious. So the flow from the outside to the inside is just more and more natural. And that's why, like Christelle is saying, when you don't feel it, but you say it anyway, it helps.
Except of course for a cough.
When you're in a bad mood, but you act happy anyway, it helps. When you're tired, but you act energized anyway, it helps. When you're, not in the most spiritual space, but you act like God would want anyway, it helps. Because all of these things help align the inner, which is of course how the inner core is, with what you're doing on the outside. So that's always beneficial, especially, because sometimes being human, you know, we're not in a good space. And, you know, that's okay. We're human. We're human. Sometimes we have rough times, or like Loretta was saying, people around us that give us negative energy, you know, and that hurts us. That makes it harder for us. That happens. But, you know, when we're in that space, just to like keep realigning with what we know is how we're supposed to be acting. And that helps us get there. Jenny, did you want to add something?
I'm good as of now. Maybe later.
Okay, no problem. No problem. No problem. No problem. I wasn't sure.
You know, in my conversation today, we were talking about situations of road rage where people driving down the road interrupt each other in a manner that seems almost purposefully. And I was trying to explain, well, they're probably just trying to take your joy from you. You're driving down the road having a good time, and these people just come in and do this stuff. Just, but why would they do it? And I said, just because they're trying to steal your joy. And then within a couple of minutes, I had heard that my comments should be curtailed to hello, because nobody wants to really hear what I have to say. And I thought to myself, whoa, that really hurts. And I didn't know really how to respond to it. And then the next comment was, you know, your body language is telling a lot. And I almost related it to the driving and the road rage. And I thought, yeah, the road rage, where those cars are going and what they're doing to each other is saying a lot. And I looked at her and I said, you know, I said, I'm not offended. It's really quite all right. I can handle myself and I can be quiet. I'm old enough. I can learn how to be quiet and listen. But I don't want road rage to overcome me right now. I don't want to be angry about this. I just want to deal with it the best that I can. End of story.
I think what you're saying, Loretta, is resonating a certain spiritual work that we all need to do, always. It says after a person passes away, the souls are doing it above, which is the work of nullification, of self-nullification. And, you know, a lot of times, like it sounds in this obviously very painful situation you're relating, but all of us, sometimes in painful situations, sometimes in even more painful situations, and sometimes not even in painful situations, just in life, there's this almost like a friction, you know, or just different things happen. And a very godly movement is nullification. It's a very godly space to go, is like to put yourself aside. Ultimately, of course, when God gives us situations with other people, it's really a tool to help us practice nullification to God. Like the ultimate nullification is a nullification to God. But humans have a very hard time with nullification. That's how God made us. You know, every one of us, every human has a hard time with nullification. Unless a person is absolutely perfect, tzaddik, perfectly righteous. But the rest of mankind, you know, we have a hard time. Our sense of self is very strong. I think sometimes that's maybe the process of why God wants us to get married and have children. It's a very nullifying process, you know. For marriage to work, you need a lot of nullification, and then to be a mother, you need a lot more. But it's sort of like almost to move from a self-centered, which is our natural state, to a God-centered reality, the stepping stone to that sometimes is becoming a other-centered person, which I think sometimes is sort of like sometimes something you tell yourself, which helps me sometimes in these situations, is it doesn't make a difference who's right. Like, that's almost irrelevant. You know, like, I mean, obviously, in other words, what she's saying was very painful to you. She might not have meant it that way, but it was very painful. But it doesn't always make a difference who's right, who's wrong, because we get stuck on who's right. And the point is just like sometimes changing it in my brain to like, I'm talking to myself as well with this. Obviously, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You know, it's like, it's not who's right. It's how does this more like bring God into this world? Doesn't make a difference who's right. It just is like, what would God want from me at this moment? And God wants us to find that place inside ourselves that we put ourselves aside. Put ourselves aside for other people, ultimately, of course, putting ourselves aside for God. Every time we serve God, especially when we don't want to, especially in the thing that's like difficult for us, that's a piece of nullification. So like let's say you really enjoy praying. You do enjoy praying to God. It feels good. You know, he's listening. It's a very comforting, good process. But still, if you didn't know that God wanted it, you'd be doing something else. So it's nullification of self to pray because you're doing it because he wants it, even though it doesn't bother you and you actually feel good about it. But it's still a piece of nullification. Now, let's say you're doing something you really don't want, like because of God, you're dressing in a modest fashion. And that's really hard for you because it goes against everything, however you know, or been living your life until you realize to do that. So that's like hard for you to switch to that piece of modest dress. It's hard, but you do it because you know God wants it. Well, that's a really big piece of nullification because you're really, really putting aside what you want to do what God wants. And those are like putting self aside for God. But when we're interacting with other people, you know, when my ego asserts itself, sometimes in protection of other people's egos, we could use that also as like an opportunity of like, wait, okay, God, here's an opportunity. You know, and again, not exactly, your case isn't exactly that, but like very often, you know, we get into the situation where there's a conflict with someone else and you know you're right. And when we get very stuck because we know we're right. And sometimes you really have to tell yourself, I'm right, but who cares? So what? You know, doesn't make a difference. Ultimately, it's irrelevant. Obviously, sometimes it is relevant. You know, sometimes it's a significant issue and doing the wrong thing would be a big deal. And sometimes it's such a minor issue, like, you know, like you say to someone, oh, I thought we were going to meet today at 2. And she's like, I told you I couldn't make it. And you're like, you never told me that. Who cares? That make a difference. Okay. You know, you can nullify yourself. It doesn't make a difference. It's irrelevant. Ultimately, who's right? It's just being in a more godly space. So I think we all have these challenges, and they just each one like bit by bit by bit can wear away a little bit at our ego. You know, can help us a little bit nullify ourselves and allow more and more God's light to shine through us. Becca? I can't hear you because you're muted.
I have tended to be a very sensitive person as far as like people's demeanor toward me. Like maybe the cashier at the grocery store, if she's a little surly and grouchy, I used to immediately take that stuff personally. What is her problem with me? She doesn't like the way I dressed. I don't smell right. What did I say? What did I do? You know, or just anybody, anytime, you know, just very, very sensitive. And of course, I missed out on the first few minutes of this meeting, so I don't know what went on with Miss Brown. But for me, the thing that helped me most was to realize that other people have other things going on in their life at different times. Maybe the cashier was surly with me because maybe her boss yelled at her for something and that put her in a bad mood. Or maybe she had a fight with her husband, or, you know, this, that, or another thing. Maybe it's not about me at all. And maybe she's dealing with something. Maybe she's just dealing with something in her life that she is not happy with. She's not happy with herself for some reason. I don't know. But I watched like a little video clip of Brene Brown, and where she was being interviewed with somebody, and she said that I used to think people were behaving badly just to make me mad, just to, you know, and so she was taking it personally that way. And so she said that her counselor or whoever it was asked her, well, what if people are just doing the best they can? You know, what? And so she really kind of thought about that and dwelled on that. And I had to think about that myself, you know, that maybe it's not about me at all. Maybe it's it could be anything, and I have to stop maybe inserting myself into everything. It's like what you were saying about self-nullification, and that has really been a daily work for me, because it used to be I was so self-absorbed and everything was about me, you know, and everything was a reflection of me, or you know, everything was about me. And when I was able to step back a little bit and kind of take myself out of the picture, it really was liberating. It really
I think
helped.
what you're saying makes so much sense. It's what you said is two things, very important. One is the idea of, and we've touched on this in class and other times, judging other people favorably, which is a very strong value. And judging other people favorably is, yeah, exactly like you said. I don't know what's going on in this other person's life, you know, and you could always window dress it in any way to look at the situation, like totally decontextualize it, and like, you know, who knows what's going on, like you're saying, who knows what's going on that's making her behave this way. And it's quite likely not to do with me, because I didn't do anything against her, but it could be so many other factors. And also what you said, which I also feel very strongly is a very good way to give the person the benefit of the doubt, is to think, like you said, they're doing the best they can with the tools they currently have. Maybe they don't have very good tools, you know, but I can still look, and this is also very liberating for people in our past that have hurt us, especially if it's family members and things like that. It's a very, very liberating thought to just hold on, is to release pain by thinking he, she, they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. They didn't have very good tools. They didn't have the training, they didn't have the education, they didn't have the awareness. Again, putting that together with benefit of the doubt, who knows what they went through in their life that led them to behave this way. But that they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. And it's a very releasing thought. And you're thinking it consciously to release a lot of pain. Pain in the past, pain from how you were treated in previous times by significant people in your life. It's a very, 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 very healthy thought. So thank you for sharing those 2 points. They're both very, 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 very true. Anyone else want to chime in on this? Okay, well, thank you. So what I wanted to share today was from a talk of the Rebbe. I was actually going to do it last week when it was time, but obviously God wanted us to do something different last week. So this is right now is the time for it, because now is when we're doing it. So this is from the talk of the Rebbe from the 13th of Iyar. Today is the 19th of Iyar. I mean, this was last week of 1991. And the Rebbe in this talk is speaking a lot about redemption. You know, a favorite theme of the Rebbe is redemption. He's talking a lot about redemption. At the end of the talk, and this is literally set off by like 3 dots, which is very unusual for there to be any such a marking in any of the talks of the Rebbe. So you have 3 little dots, like separation. And then the last 4 sections of the talk, the Rebbe really turns this to the nations of the world and really turns the spotlight on redemption on the nations of the world. So I thought it'd be very, very appropriate to share this. So the Rebbe, so I'm just going to give you over the Rebbe says, and we could discuss it. And again, what the Rebbe's been saying in this whole talk is how much we've seen progress in this movement toward redemption, and how we're holding really by, as we would say, the cusp of redemption. It's so here. We just have to like cross over that threshold. It's been a very painful walk crossing that threshold, but just crossing over that threshold into redemption. And the Rebbe says that that sometimes people say, sorry, I want to try to give it to you more literally, so I have to see the words, and my poor eyes have been abused for many, many years, so they're not such good shape. So a person could say like, so first the Rebbe says people could say like, wow, if the Rebbe is saying Mashiach is coming, the redemption is coming now, it's almost like a scary thought for some people. Because think of everything you've built up your whole life. Built up your business, redid your house, have all these acquaintances, connections, pull. I'm going to lose all that? Like, you know, I don't know if I'm ready to lose everything I've developed all my life. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. And the Rebbe says, and this is, of course, his point throughout the talk, he's saying, redemption doesn't mean we're losing anything. What it means is we're bringing God into what is. This works in the Hebrew. I'll try to explain it, so hopefully it'll be clear. The word for exile in Hebrew is gola. The word for redemption is geula. Sounds pretty similar. If you were actually seeing those 2 words spelled out, the difference between gola and geula is 1 Hebrew letter, the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So if you take the word gola and insert an Aleph, you create the word geula. If you take the word exile and insert 1 letter, an Aleph, you create redemption. So what does the Aleph stand for? The Aleph stands for Aleph, like Aluf, the ultimate commander, the commander of the world, God. When you take this world of exile, the world we live in as we know it, but you bring God in, Now you created redemption. So it's not that redemption means suddenly somebody's going to wave a wand and there's this new, sprinkling of fairy dust flying around. And then we're in this new world that we've never experienced before. No, redemption means this world with God revealed in it. This current world, our current world, but with God revealed in it. That's redemption. So all the good things we've built up, we've acquired, your homes, your businesses, whatever, all the things you don't want to lose, the Bible says you're not going to lose. Redemption doesn't mean you're going to lose anything. Redemption means you're going to bring God into everything you have. Now that might change a lot because God in our world, God in the world revealed, of course, will change lots and lots and lots of things in the world, obviously. But it's still, in essence, every good thing that we have will still remain. What will be gone will be all the bad parts. But the good will remain because the good's part of the redemption. There's nothing, again, redemption doesn't mean we have to wash away this world. It means we're uncovering God in this world. And then when you uncover God in the world, things will change, like the bad will be removed. So therefore, a lot of people's jobs might be obviated because we won't have those problems anymore, that so many jobs circle around problems, that those problems are dealing with. But that's okay, because people will be like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be a soldier protecting, but we're not fighting anymore. I'm supposed to be a doctor healing, but everyone's healthy. I'm supposed to be a therapist, but nobody has mental illness anymore, or has problems and has stress and has friction. Oh, well, thank God. So what am I going to do? Oh, well, you could take all this energy you have and use it to do what you really want to do, connect to God. So obviously it's not going to happen in one day, but that's going to be the gradual process of people like resyncing themselves into a God-oriented life, into a life that revolves around God, which is ultimately really what every single human wants, is God in their life. And therefore that everything in their life should be subsumed in their relationship to God. So it'll be a little learning experience at first. And obviously some people here that know more will help other people that know less, but that's what's going to happen. So Gola, Geula, the only difference is bringing God in. So when we're looking at our world, we shouldn't have any fear that, well, if redemption comes, I'm going to lose this good thing and I'm going to lose that good thing. Nothing good's going to be lost. It'll just be all realigned to God's reality. Then I'm not going through every detail that I was saying here. I wanted to bring in this point that Rebbe brings out about the world. The Rebbe says that since redemption means the world right, the world with God revealed, it's understood. Thank you. I don't know. It means that all matters of the world and all mankind, all 8 billion, all peoples of the world truly are here and want to help to do this, to help to bring the redemption. Meaning, if we thought of redemption as like, okay, a new fairy tale reality that's coming down from heavens. So what's happening in this world doesn't have that much connection to it. Maybe, we need to be especially good and listen to God to create the merits for it. But the matter, the nitty gritty of this world doesn't have that much to do with it because none of this is going to be around with redemption. But that's not true. All of this is going to be around with redemption. It's just all going to be right. It's all going to be godly. So as such, everything in this world has a job and has a purpose moving toward redemption. And all peoples of this world are part of the process, because all peoples of this world are going to be part of redemption. And therefore, they all have their function to help bring redemption. In other words, if redemption means inserting the Aleph, inserting God in this reality, and that creates redemption. So every human being, as they more and more insert God into their life and insert God into their reality, they're creating the unfolding of the redemption. And the Rebbe says, therefore, because we're so close to the complete revelation of Mashiach, of redemption, we see this in the world. We see the world shifting. We see peoples in the world behaving differently because they're more and more inserting the Aleph into their lives. And therefore their lives are more and more shining with the energy of redemption, with God's energy, with the energy of Geula, of revelation of God. And the Rebbe said this has been a process going on for generations. So if we look over time generationally, we can see generation by generation, the world inching, it's a slow process, closer and closer and closer to being in sync with God, to being in sync with redemption, to being in sync with being good people, moral people, kind people. It's a slow process, but that's what God wants of the world for redemption. You know, when CNN at one point came by Lubavitcher Rebbe, you know, he had on Sundays, he would have a dollar line that anyone in the world could stand in. So anyone could have their private audience. No appointment necessary, just had to wait for your turn in line. So during one of these Sundays, CNN walked by and they asked the Rebbe, what's his message to the world? And he said, the redemption is coming. All we need to do is add in goodness and kindness. This is the Rebbe's message to the world. So this is for mankind. This is CNN. This is for the 8 billion out there. We need to know that redemption is coming. We all need to know this. This will be a message we all need to take to our heart. And we need to understand that we have a part in the process. And how do we do our part in the process? By adding in goodness and kindness. As we add in goodness and kindness, that's how we, each individual, helps facilitate redemption, helps move themselves and move the world to redemption. So the Rebbe is saying here that the world used to be very, very, very far from this vision. The world used to be very far from a vision of being good and kind people. That wasn't like the way of the world. That wasn't what was cool in the world. It wasn't what was in the world. That wasn't what people were striving to be. For a lot of mankind's humanity, you know, from all of humanity's history, it was like who could grab more power, who could be more powerful, who could be more aggressive. You know, we would think of the word imperialism. Imperialism means who could be the biggest bully on the block. And that was statecraft. That was how the world operated. That was what the world thought was correct and admirable. That was like good. So there said we've seen a very big shift in how the world looks at itself, how the world looks at how the world should behave, and how these concepts, like, you know, I'm giving the example of imperialism, the Rebbe didn't, but these types of concepts, these types of behaviors aren't approved of anymore, aren't condoned, let alone aren't thought of as good and admirable, which is how it used to be. The world looks at things very differently. The world says, no, that's not nice. That's called aggression. You can't just be aggressive and, you know, grab up other people's lands because you've got more power than them. That's not appropriate. So the world is shifting in how it looks at what's appropriate behaviors. as we get closer and closer to inserting this Aleph, this God awareness in the world, people in the world are more and more in sync with what would be a godlike behavior. And aggression isn't a godlike behavior. And being mean to other people or country to country isn't a godlike behavior, isn't how God wants us to act. So the Rebbe says we're seeing in the world people morphing in this direction of, as the Rebbe said to CNN, goodness and kindness. Now we see this also, the Rebbe says, in how the nations of the world treat the Jewish people. That it used to be, in previous times, most of the Jews lived in countries that were very harsh and oppressive to the Jewish people, and were harsh and oppressive to our service of God. But now, the Rebbe says, the majority of world Jewry lives in countries that are giving us religious freedom, like the majority of Jews live today in America. Obviously, Jews live all over the world, but the majority of the Jews live in America, which the Rebbe always held very highly of. So I'm sure all of the Rebbe's good wishes toward America is helping America now. The Rebbe always called America the country of kindness. America in general is founded with this concept of an awareness of God and the values of kindness, values of helping other people. That's the foundation. Hopefully it should carry us through now with whatever we're going through in this country. So the Rebbe says, the majority of Jews live in this country. That helps the Jews to serve God. That makes it easier for Jews to serve God. And obviously, the more the world is helping the Jews serve God, that means the more the world is serving God. The more the world is connecting to God. And then the Rebbe said that, of course, in more recent times, this is in the early 90s when the Rebbe was talking, which was when communism crumbled and crashed, down to smithereens, to nothingness. So suddenly all of those countries in the whole Soviet bloc, under that whole communist regime, suddenly, gradually, there was a concept of freedom for all those billions of people that have been persecuted and have been stifled for some 70 years. So suddenly in all those countries, where of course there are also many Jews, all those Jews, and we're talking 1991, so by 1991, all of those Jews in the communist bloc, well, they were also able to have religious freedom. They were also able to serve God. So that shifted the world, that now there's so many more humans that can serve God, that are able to express an awareness of God, and that are able to help Jews serve God. And also, of course, in this whole communist area, they enabled the Jews that wanted to leave Eastern Europe and go to Israel to go to Israel. So here we have these countries that for the past 70 years were persecuting Jews and were persecuting a belief in God. It wasn't only Jews, it was any belief in God was forbidden. The official belief was atheism, and one's not allowed to have a belief in God. And suddenly all these countries are acknowledging God, are allowing all the people in their countries to express a belief in God, including the Jewish people, and are allowing the Jews now to serve God, and are helping the Jews who want to leave these countries and go to Israel and live maybe a more Jewish life there, do so. So like the Rebbe says, hello, that's a huge shift in the energy of the world. Such a huge shift. Now, most people here, I imagine, are old enough to remember that. We lived through it. So, especially if you had any connections to anyone in this area, you were just in touch with this. There says that was a huge cosmic spiritual shift in the world. That all the billions of mankind that were forbidden to believe in God, that were forbidden to express any relationship with God, suddenly that all opened up. And now they can believe in God. They can help Jews serve God. They can help Jews go to Israel to live there. What a change. What a change in bringing that olive and bringing that awareness of God into our world. And then the Rebbe says, we also see in recent times, and obviously this has progressed and progressed and progressed since the Rebbe said this in 1991, that the nations of the world themselves are shifting in terms of how they relate, how they understand what's the best way to treat people and how they're treating people. The Rebbe gives two examples that happened in 1991, highlights two examples of how the world has changed. Now, again, we're in 2021, so maybe at this point it doesn't seem as, oh my gosh. But again, since most of us are old enough to remember, we can put ourselves in that headspace and really see that shift. So the first thing the Rebbe focuses on is what was happening in 1991 when there was this horrific civil war going on between Bosnia and Sarajevo. And for those of us that remember, it was such a cruel, I don't want to go into the details because they're horrible, but the two sides were so cruel to each other. There was so much horrific things going on, so much abuse going on as each side would get captives from the other in this very, 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 very horrible civil war. And what happened? So here's America, comfortable compared to the rest of the world, very rich, affluent America, seeing on their TV screens shots of what's happening and how these people, the civilians in Bosnia and Sarajevo, what's happening to them, how they have no food, how they have no fuel, how they have no clothing, how they have no medicine, how they're dying, how children are just dying from all the fallout of war. And the American people were like, that's horrible, we want to help. And the American government did something that at that time wasn't heard of. They took their Air Force and they sent it to these areas to drop down food, clothing, medicine, to help these people, to help these civilian victims of the war. And that, like, never happened before. And the Rebbe says, and of course the Rebbe can state this with more certainty than we could, America had nothing to gain from doing that. Didn't need to score any brownie points. Didn't need to get either Bosnia or Sarajevo. They're both completely meaningless in the American political radar. No gain. It was just that the people of America saw suffering on their screens like that. They were like, that's horrible. How can we let people like that suffer? How can we let innocent people suffer? We want to help. And that's what we did to help. And I said, that's such a shift. Because that shift shows, as we would call humanitarianism, that shift shows that people are thinking, we want to help people just because we want to help people. Just because we don't want to see people in pain if we can do something about it. We don't want to see people suffering if we can do something about it. That's a huge shift. That's a huge shift of bringing the olive, this awareness of God into the world, that therefore the world is saying, what can I do to help? What can I do to make it better for another human being? Not that I know this human being, not that I'm related to this human being, not that I ever will know this human being, not that I will ever benefit from helping this human being, but what can I do to help another human being who's suffering? Now, obviously, hopefully we've seen this since as well. Maybe Christelle could talk more to this point of us using our power, the American Army and Air Force and such things, to help people that are suffering, instead of how we normally think of it as either a defensive or offensive tool, but as a tool of helping, as a tool of helping others. I have a friend, someone I know, who's very into this concept of what he calls, swords into plowshares. And he's always finding examples all over the world of people taking military and using it to help. So that's more and more and more happening all over the world. And that's a movement from exile to redemption. A second example, the Rebbe says, this is in 1991. So that time the president was George Bush, the first. And the Rebbe says that the president said about himself when he was inaugurated that he wanted to be known as the educational president. He wanted to be known as a president that reformed education in America. Now, for Jewish people, education as a value is, millenniums old. That's always been part of the Jewish value system, is a very, very, very high priority on education, on learning, on study, especially, of course, godly study, as it helps us connect to God. But in the world, unfortunately, education was not really generally viewed as such a cool thing. It wasn't always viewed as such an important thing. It wasn't viewed as such a priority. Money and power are priorities. Sometimes you need education to get there, but of course, in earlier times, you didn't really, and therefore education was not really so high on the totem pole. So for the president of a country like America to be saying, this is a huge value. Obviously, in other words, obviously there's a value in, helping our economy. There's a value in controlling crime. There's a value in, there's lots of values presidents speak about. But this president is saying there's a value in helping our education system. There's a value that Americans should be better educated as people. That's a value in line with God's vision of the world. That's a value in line with redemption. Not just viewing education as a tool to create success or a dollar sign or a job, but viewing education as something of a value, studying as something of a value. And that's a godly value. So for the world to adopt that value and you take that value as their own, the Rebbe says that's another sign of the world walking toward redemption. Now the Rebbe says there's so many examples. The Rebbe says here, I'm giving you two. There's so many examples happening. They're happening literally every day. There are examples happening in big strokes, like the Rebbe here gave two examples with the country of America. And there's in each individual, in human beings all over the world, these things are happening. That means they're walking closer and closer to God. And all of this is to affirm for us how incredibly close we are to the redemption. It's also supposed to empower us and make us aware of how we bring redemption. Like if you think of yourself, if you can think from 1991 to 2021, you can think of yourself and the road you've walked these last 30 years. And hopefully you can look back at that road. Roads are sometimes a little curvy, a little circuitous. They're not always like straight up. But if you have a 30-year vantage point and you can look back, obviously for those of you 25 will be hard, but I pretend. But if you're 40 or older, you can look back and see the last 30 years. Hopefully you should be able to really see, again, it wasn't always straight. Sometimes there were some detours or things that seemed to you like detours. Maybe they weren't really detours. God knows what he's doing. But see yourself personally and your world getting closer and closer to God. more and more bringing that Aleph, the reality of God, into your world and into the environment around you, moving closer and closer and closer to redemption, to the absolute unfolding of God in this world. Does anyone have what to share on that? How they've seen that journey, that progression happening either in their personal life or in the world around them or in the bigger global picture, how they've seen that their world or the world around them or the world moving toward redemption.
You know, I think it's interesting. You were saying the curves, and you know, whenever we do have these curves in our world, you know, like you said, sometimes they can feel like setbacks, and you know, and it could be curves that were not our fault. You know, not necessarily bad decisions, but sometimes trauma, things that were done that you know we had no say so in, and so on and so forth. But what I found is that you know some of these things help me to relate to a larger group of people than I would have been able to relate to otherwise. um I don't know. It makes it easier to have empathy sometimes or to understand where somebody's coming from. But I think my biggest thing that I've seen in my own life is that as I continue my walk and trying to get closer to Hashem, I find that I walk away. I mean, and this is something that I don't necessarily understand so much. And sometimes I'm curious about, but I definitely see myself walking more toward Hashem and people who have those same ideals as I do. And inevitably, that means that I'm walking away from other people. And sometimes I'm not so sure how, you know, to manage that. And, but, you know, if people aren't with you in your journey to live a different life, like you were saying, like, you know, these ideals that we come to take very important, like, you know, dressing more modestly, behaving more modestly, being more closer to Hashem, you know, that's going to lead us from one group of people sometimes into another.
It will, and that's, I'm sure everyone here has experienced what Christelle is saying. I would imagine, so Becca said, absolutely. I imagine it's almost impossible not to, besides maybe for family, but definitely when you're talking about choice relationships, it's not even that there's a conscious movement of saying, I don't want to hang out with her anymore. We have different values. It doesn't usually happen like that. It's just such a natural morphing because you don't want to go and do those things that I'm saying she here in the generic, whatever she is doing. So you're not going to be so comfortable doing that. And then she might not be so interested in what you're doing. It just sort of happens very naturally. And sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's painful. And sometimes the relationship can overcome that. And the depth of the relationship carries past the circumstantial things going on. But sometimes there's more deeper philosophical rifts that just occur, and it's part of the process. It is part of the process.
I think it's with family too sometimes. I mean, I know for myself it's been that way, and that's unfortunate. And it's not even a rift sometimes as necessarily as, you know, you just lead this polar opposite life.
Right. So then hopefully it's not a rift, it's more gentle than that, but it is just like a distancing because you're not going to go to that party celebrating that or that party acknowledging that, even though the parties aren't very religious, but still you're not gonna go to those things, and they're not gonna want to come to your celebrations either. It's true, you know. And again, I think that's so individualized because some people definitely are able to take close family members with them on their journey. They might not be in exactly the same space, but they're able to come closer and closer, which is such a beautiful thing to see. And sometimes, again, based on the people, the relationships, the personalities involved, the depth of difference in viewpoint, it's just, you just can't. And you just accept that as part of God's will as well. And you still stay respectful you know, as much as one can, as is appropriate, respectful, and, you know, positive and loving in whatever situation is appropriate. But that real deep closeness, yeah, sometimes temporarily right now we can't have, which is a loss, which is definitely a loss. And that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning about things we're doing that really feel like, okay, God, this is about you. It's not about me. And not necessarily do we want to have that loss in our life. It'll just sort of inevitable in how things worked out in these situations. And again, not everyone does. And some people really manage to have the relationships. And many, many people do have those losses. And a loss is painful. A loss of a relationship is always painful.
You know, I found out with the loss of Jack, how many people it brought together, that we were not enemies or whatever, just different beliefs, let me put it that way. And how many people it brought together to, I can't quite put it in words, but how it healed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So many differences in the family, and how their misconception of Judaism, and after the rabbi spoke, how they all, everyone there made the comment of what an incredible talk he gave, and how his love was so evident for Jack, and how it just was amazing. And it brought them to realize that their conception of Jews and Judaism is not what they had seen. So it was very healing time for a lot of people. And just the passing of Jack did that, which was one of the good things that come out of this horrible time.
Well, that's really special because now those relationships are really, really important in your life. So it's really, it was a very amazing kindness of God that he helped things heal that could open up a new level of closeness, because you need that closeness. You need that closeness.
Oh, yes.
So he opened it up and he gave you the opportunity to have that closeness. And now, of course, it's dependent on you and them, but we only turn to ourselves to foster that relationship, because that's really important for you now.
Well, I have found that his brothers can't handle me right now because I remind them of Jack. And it was hard. It was hurtful, but I understand. And, you know, they'll come around, and I understand their pain, and I understand I'm too big of a reminder right now, because, I mean, they love me. They love me, and I'm part of the family. They just can't deal with it. And that's a man thing. I realize that men deal with grief a lot different than women do. And every time I would send them a note and stuff, it just broke open the hurt. So it was hard for me, but I have other family that were close. Actually, Jack's sister died 2 weeks before he did. And her daughter and I are very close, because not only because we've been close before, but now we're super close because we call each other and cry together. But I understand why it hurt for a while, but I understand why the brothers can't deal with me, and it will change. It will change. And because I am close to them, it's just, I understand. God's given me that ability to understand it. So
That's great that you're not getting stuck. Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the class, that just like Becca was saying, you know, looking at it from no understanding it's not you, it's them. And then, you know, being able to frame it that way and understanding it's not you and it's not the relationship with you. It's just, yeah, a lot of times people handle grief by wanting to forget. And not be reminded of it. And reminders are painful just because we don't want to think about it. Yeah, right. Very true.
And at first I thought, I thought, well, maybe they don't like me. Maybe I did something at the funeral. You know, I went through all that. And then after I talked to Terry and stuff, she said, no, she said, they love you and I love you. And I said, I know. And I said, it's just hard. And we got through it. And between the two of us, we got through it. And I know it's not me. I know it's their grief. And that makes it okay.
Right. Right. But that was kind of God, that you have this ability to have this deeper relationship with people that maybe were a little stuck and you couldn't have the relationship with before, because you really, really need that relationship now. So I'm really glad that you can
Oh, I do.
have it.
I do need it.
Anyone else have anything to comment on this idea of how they've seen the movement in their life or in their world or the world in general, seeing the world moving, morphing, gradually morphing in a more godly direction of goodness, of kindness? Jenny?
Yeah, Mrs. Torren. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of good things that's happening in our world, because before I was upset because I don't understand what COVID is, and I just don't understand what's happening in the world. But you know, little by little, I started to understand by listening, to you and to some of the rabbis, and what I've noticed is the world, the people are becoming good. I see a lot of good people nowadays. Like at first, it's like this COVID is uniting us to be a better person. Because I've noticed a lot of people helping each other nowadays. Like here in Canada, it's like before we only have food bank, but now there are too many food hubs they added, so they're giving more and more, and people are donating more and more. And even in my country back home in the Philippines, it's like there are too many bullies, but the bullies there now, they are donating, they are donating food for people, and a lot of food pantry, and those people who are doing that are the rebels. And I couldn't imagine the rebels are doing that. Before, they're just taking your money, they're taking your stuffs, and now they're giving away. It's like, yeah, lots of things. And also, I see too many people, they started to love natures. Before, they don't, they don't appreciate it. They don't appreciate plants. Some people, they just love cutting trees. They love, they don't really care about the natures. But nowadays, I saw too many people, they're just having plants in their house. It's like they make their house like a jungle. And they said because there's nothing to do, it's so boring, so they're planting. I think that's good thing that people are starting to love, God's creation too. And I think this COVID thing is like you can see a really bad ones and you can see more of good people. It's like the good is coming out, from each of us. Like, my friend, not very close to me, but she is a little bit mean. But I would say that, oh, she's turning nice, because last time I think the husband got COVID, and I talked to her about the 7 laws of Noahide, and it's not easy for her to accept. But this time, uh, I told her to get rid of your negativity in life so that you don't get COVID. I think you better start sharing your money and, just give it to the poorest of the poor. And then what she did is she showed me the picture. Okay, Jenny, I did it so that I don't get COVID. I said, I'm not saying that it's not gonna get you COVID, but it's gonna get rid all the negativity in your life. I said, you have to do good because, sooner or later, the Moshiach is coming. I said, because she's waiting for Jesus. I said, the only way for you to see Jesus, on the clouds, it's either it's death, or it's either you have to grow wings, which is, I don't know if possible to grow wings to fly in the clouds. I said, you know what? There is only one that will come. It's the Moshiach. That's it. That's the only possible thing. And then she said, I hope she comes because I'm so stressed now. And it's like people are doing great things because they're so stressed. And I don't know. It's like they're so stressed, and the only thing that they think that will get rid of this curse in their life is, be good, be kind, be the love, and yeah, I said everything in this world is changing, and even I forgive, all the people who did harm to me in the past, and I said, it's time to be kind, it's time to be good, so that the Moshiach will come soon. Yeah, that's my preparation. That's what I always said to my friends. Thank you.
That's a good preparation, getting rid of our own pain and negativity and hurt and forgiving all the past. That's big. That's big. We can get very stuck in all the hurt we've experienced. Of course, everyone has experienced hurt at various points in their life. And then we just sort of nurture that pain inside of us. And when we forgive, we like release the pain. So it could just like wash away. And that's definitely part of the process of bringing Mashiach. And it's so great the way you talk to your friend and you had the guts to say things like that, that definitely, I'm sure, is inspiring lots of people here to think, hey, could I ever say that to my friend? Obviously each one of us in our own lingo, with our own syntax, but I think thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure all of us have people that we'd like to talk to us straight like that. And maybe we have to work up the courage and say, hey, Jenny did it. I could do it too. Nothing really bad happened to her after she did it. So I could do it too. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Anyone else have something they'd like to share about seeing this progression in themselves and their lives or in the world? All right, well, it is late and I'm sure everyone has experienced it. Some people it's easier to talk and some people it's not, but I know we've all experienced it because that's our world and that's what we've all been going through. And I'm sure everything, that was said, now I think it resonated for all of us, each one of us, relating it to our life or, what Christelle said or Dixie or Jenny, all of us probably have resonating points in terms of what we've been through and are going through. And definitely all of us seeing the world morphing to redemption and knowing we are huge players in the process. Can't think of any bigger player than a Noahide who's saying, you know what? I represent this world and I'm bringing God in.
Yep. Amen.
That's what you're doing. You're bringing God in, and that's how Mashiach redemption comes. So thank you so much for being you and doing that, despite sometimes the flack you get for it, inner and outer. And we should see it. The world's going through a lot. As Jenny said, people getting more and more toward goodness and a lot of stuff coming out in the process. And for sure, absolutely, no question. It should be a wonderful week. It should be a week where we see that Aleph, God revealed, work free, so revealed. And just like Dixie said, how she saw when the rabbi spoke, that was so healing to so many relationships. So when God is revealed, the healing should naturally happen. So we should see God revealed, and with God's revelation, the healing just naturally flowing on all levels. Thank you so much for joining. Shavua Tov.
Shabbat Tov. Thank you.
Shavua Tov.